Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Before we start, I want to thank my latest Patreon subscribers, Joe and Eben, for their support, and all my other Patreon subscribers for their continued support. This podcast would struggle to continue without them, and my Patreon page is quickly becoming a great place to hang out and talk about the world of conducting. There'll be more about my Patreon page later on in this episode. Today, I conduct a conversation with a Finnish conductor who first came to prominence after winning the Jorma Panela Conductors Competition in 2003. Since then, she's been the chief conductor of the Nordic Chamber Orchestra, and since 2020, she's been the chief conductor of the Iceland Symphony Orchestra. It's a great pleasure to welcome Eva Ollikainen. Eva, it's lovely to meet you, to speak with you, and to see you. How are you?
Lovely to meet you, Mike. I'm good, thank you. A week at home in between engagements, so yeah. Very, very lovely. It happens to be my son's birthday today, so.
Oh well, wish him happy birthday from me and from the podcast listeners. And we were laughing before I pressed record because you're in Odense in Denmark, which is a very, very pretty place. And you're in the prettiest bit, the old bit, right by the concert hall, which I conducted there once. And we were laughing because we're both sitting in our studies, which are painted almost identical colour of red. So I can see scores behind you, much like there are scores behind me. We need a happy place, don't we, as conductors, somewhere we can sit and study and feel right.
Oh, that's so important to have, your own bat cave. I don't know, I call it a bat cave.
Yeah. Mine's a man cave because I live with my wife and my two daughters. So, I'm the only man in the house and it is my man cave. But yeah, it's a cave. And that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Red is such a vibrant color for me somehow. I love colors. Yeah, which you wouldn't see from my clothing when I'm traveling around because I always wear black just because it's so much more practical, I think. But I'm a true color person and very much obsessed with all different shades and how they work together. So this is my hobby at home.
You did show me the color of your walls, but I didn't spot if there was a piano in your room.
Yes,
and the reason for bringing up the piano is that I always do my Wikipedia and website searches to do my homework in my little notebook. And Wikipedia tells me that the first instrument that you started age 3 was the piano. So did you come from a musical family? Your parents, were they musical? How did you end up sitting at the piano age 3?
Oh dear, yeah, this is a long thread. Well, my bigger sister is very musical, and she's 5 years my senior, and she was already playing very well by the time I was born. And my mother was interested at the time about like piano pedagogy, and she was studying it a little bit at the time. And our father, he was like kind of like a very natural, self-taught musician. He picked up any instrument and went to the sauna, cold sauna, I should add, and stayed there for a few hours. And then he kind of knew how to play said instrument. So
wow.
He was very curious about things. But yeah, my childhood was otherwise maybe not the brightest one. I come from a highly dysfunctional family. So music was for me from a very early age. It was definitely the savior of my life. And I put a lot of myself in it. And yes, the piano just happened to be my first instrument, which I then played until age 21, basically, when I graduated from the Sibelius Academy with a piano. And
But you also managed to fit in the violin and the French horn. To what degree? Were you a good violinist or French hornist?
Short answer is no. But I did play the violin quite a bit. But during my studies, and especially my conducting studies, we had this conducting class orchestra, and I always played in the second violin section there. And I also played very often in the Sibelius Academy Symphony Orchestra, the second violin. And these were all wonderful experiences. I loved to play the violin, but Unfortunately, I should have been much younger, I think, when I started the instrument, if I wanted to become really good at it. And the French horn is, well, I have no idea why people are talking about this. I love the French horn. And yes, when I was a student at the conducting class, we had to have 3 different instruments.
Oh, okay.
At the time, and I picked the French horn. I had like 1 year classes of it officially, but then I had a shoulder surgery a little bit later, and being the type that I can't really sit still and not do anything, I figured that I could lie on the couch down and just rest one shoulder and keep playing the horn, and that was very amusing. I love the instrument, and my son plays now the horn, so sometimes we play together. It's really lovely.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, for conductors, I think knowledge of an orchestral instrument. Obviously you played the violin for long enough and well enough to play in the Sibelius Academy second violin section. I think it's very important. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't be a great conductor by only being a pianist or only being a singer or whatever, but to have that knowledge, and it's more about how it works from the inside, how you can hear the engine ticking along whilst you're in the middle of it, but also that social discourse of sitting next to somebody, sharing a music stand in a section, that sort of stuff will
feeling the energy.
Stand you in good stead when you end up standing in front of the orchestra, knowing how it works a little bit from the inside. I mean, I was a professional violinist for 22 years. I know exactly how it works on the inside. But yeah, I think it really, really, really helps. You talked about doing things young. I'm wondering whether, I remember Sakari Oromo telling me that he did, the first time he conducted publicly was a similar age to you, but it says you started your conducting studies when you were 12. So Wikipedia, it sounds like the people who've written your Wikipedia page have focused on
I have no idea where these things come from.
Yeah.
Well, it is true, I tried conducting when I was 12. That is because I was studying already the piano at the Sibelius Academy Youth Department, and Jorma Panula, our big conducting legend, he may have been the professor at the time, or maybe I'm mistaken. But he wanted to have, this kind of a laboratory for us our kids, basically. He said that everyone who is studying at the youth department, it's a very small department, of course, that everyone was welcome to try conducting. And we were a few, maybe we were 5 or 6. I don't think we were more than that. But yeah, there we were. I was 12, and Haydn 102 was on the menu, and they conducted the Sibelius Academy, the conducting class orchestra. And that's kind of, well, it was public in the sense that the Finnish broadcasting company was there with their TV cameras. And I felt myself that it didn't go so well. So I put my dreams aside for 3 years. And during these 3 years, it took me 3 years to realize that maybe you can't be perfect the first time. No. And that maybe you should study. And then after 3 years, when I was 15, I called Jorma Panula and asked if I could come to his youth class. And he said, yeah, come tomorrow. So I was anyway fairly young, but yeah, sure. I have seen the footage. Actually, I've seen the footage. It's not too bad. Being a pianist and being used to everything being precisely synchronized.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So that feeling was so terrifying that it wasn't precisely together.
And when you put that beat down, virtually all orchestras, there is a delay.
Absolutely.
With youth orchestras, it's often not quite so as big a delay because they've been told to play on my beat by somebody, and then you go through to where we both are now when we go and guest conduct, and you put that beat down on Monday morning, and you have no idea when the sound's going to happen and how it comes back. So there is always a delay. So I can imagine, if you've been a pianist all your life, and that immediacy of just going bonk on a keyboard, when you do that and nothing happens for that split second, it must be very frightening.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Jorma Panula is a name who has cropped up fairly regularly on the podcast, people who've been taught by him, many people, obviously many of the Finns I've interviewed, but also people like Barbara Hannigan, Natalie Stutzman, myself for a brief, intense period. Many people have said, even people who've studied with him, at the Sibelius Academy for, 2 or 3 years, have said that they don't really know how he teaches, because, I found that I learned possibly more by watching the other people he was teaching than me personally. And, you've got to be an observer. How did you find his teaching style compared to the next name that crops up, who was also featured, Leif Segerstam, another great Finnish conducting teacher? How did you find Jorma's style versus Leif's? Because what I can gather, they're quite different.
Oh, absolutely, very different. I think the absolute best side of Jorma Panula is that he takes every individual where they are.
Yes.
He doesn't expect you to be, if you're like 15 or if you're 35, he doesn't expect these people to be at the same level. He has a very good eye for seeing where, what does this person need to think about next? What is the next level? And he doesn't pour like 20 things in your head. He says an absolute maximum of 3 things per time. And then he, of course, expects you to have thought about those things and have made some progress for the next time. But I think that's great. And he sees the individuals, and he understands that he can't give a ready-chewed formula for anyone.
Yeah.
But what the conductor has to do is being true to themselves, being individuals, cherishing their individuality, and daring to be what you are, basically. So I think this is a true genius behind Jorma.
That's a very instrumental way of thinking as well. If you teach somebody to play the violin, which I did for 15 years or so, you don't overload them with technical advice in an hour's lesson. You focus on one thing or 2 things so that they go away and they can think about that. You can't give them, everything in one lesson. You give them some basics, and then they come away, and then they come back, and then you build and build and build. And also, as a violin teacher, it's very difficult to teach somebody who's 6'2" against somebody who's 5'0". The hand size is different, the arm size is different, the body shape is different, and as far as conducting is concerned, it's exactly the same. I'm a big guy, and I do my things the way I do things, and you do the way you do things. And so, as a teacher, to not be too prescriptive, I think is very good.
Yes, absolutely.
To shape the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, that's the thing. It's hard to say anything else about Jorma, because he was really so individual as a teacher. You can't really put him into a few sentences more than this. But that seems to work, and it still seems to work, because he still has this academy for young conductors in Finland. And I was a couple of weeks ago teaching the Sibelius Academy conducting class, and there was another 19-year-old Finnish conductor, and I was just staring at him thinking, wow, it's all there. Of course, he needs to grow and mature, and but it is fascinating. It really is.
The only thing, I'm sure I've said it on the podcast before, the only thing I would say that you can spot about a Panula conductor is their legs. They very rarely do you ever see any leg bend, because he absolutely hates that, and he hates you walking around the podium or move. So if their legs are pretty well planted, and I always think, I wonder whether you've been Jorma'd. He's either made you wear hooters underneath your shoes, or he's grabbed your legs in the middle of conducting. You're smiling and laughing, so you agree with me. But
totally.
from the waist up, if you list all of the the big names on the scene now who've studied with Jorma, they're not all the same in any regard.
No, they're very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is the thing, maybe what I mean, as great as Leif Segerström was as a teacher, he had his own way of doing things, his own technique, and he tried very hard to get all of us to do the same because it works for him. And obviously, as you say, we come in very different sizes and shapes, and it doesn't work for everyone. So I know that me as a small and small person and someone who is very, very tall, we're struggling with very different stuff, and in that sense, maybe because we all tried very hard to imitate Leif, because he has an incredible technique, very admirable,
yes,
which works for him. And so I've seen some people get a little bit stuck in their development because they were so hard trying to imitate Leif.
And again, let's go back to instrumental teaching. I think at some point you have to realize is that what you're given advice by your teacher, you have to try and apply that to your body. And sometimes that can work and sometimes that doesn't work. Going back to the height thing and the hand size thing, my teacher for 4 years in Birmingham was a wonderful violin teacher called Jackie Ross, who, to use feet and inches, sorry, old school, but she was about 5'1" and had tiny hands, and I'm 6 foot with massive hands. And I realized about into my second year, by trying to copy everything that she did, it wasn't going to work for me. I had to take the principles of what she was asking and then apply them to me. And I think that's the whole point, is when somebody like Leif, if he's trying to teach you his technique, what is it about his technique that you can apply to you rather than just copying it 100%? Because
Exactly.
Leif is a massive person. He's very tall, as well as all of the other directions. He's a big guy. Yes. But if you can take something that he does with his wrist or what he does with his fingers or apply to that to you, well, then that's great. But I can imagine people getting very stuck on trying to be a carbon copy of him.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, he was a very inspiring teacher in many ways. I mean, he had excellent ears and made us always feel like, I should have heard that. And it's great because then you keep developing your sensibilities. Sensitivity. So you can actually hear very well. And he was a very hard teacher on us as well. I remember the first class with him was with Prokofiev Fifth Symphony.
Yes.
And the first thing he did was he told us all off because he felt that our we didn't do it in the right tempo. And then he was like, "So what is 1-3-2?" And then we had to sing the metronome markings, and that's also a very humbling experience in your first class. But like, oh right, yeah, of course you're a conductor. I mean, maybe first things first.
We get fixated, don't we, on metronome marks? You just made me smile because I've discovered you might find this amusing, and others probably think I'm downright weird. I've just discovered a wonderful way of remembering metronome marks, and it's songs from my childhood that I remember. So what's interesting is I recently did 2 pieces at crotchet equals 1-3-2, and I found a database which lists every song ever. And their metronome marks. And so I can tell you that crotchet equals 1-3-2 is exactly this, because that's the same tempo as Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind and Fire, which is at 132. And so I've now got a whole list on my phone of metronome marks that I occasionally need to look at and go, well, what's 70? Well, that's the opening of Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. What's 80? It's Painted Black by the Rolling Stones. And so,
wow.
Yeah, and it really helps if you suddenly need these things. It was you mentioning 1-3-2. I thought, right, actually, I'm going to mention Boogie Wonderland. But
that's great. I do have some too, but it's like the last movement of the Sibelius Violin Concerto is 100. Yes. You just can't do it in any other tempo.
No.
Yeah.
Well, 100 is Dancing Queen by ABBA, just so you know.
Oh my God! What am I didn't realize that.
I told you it's brilliant. I mean, the point is, I've been mentioning to a few students of mine, and of course they don't have Dancing Queen etched in their brain like I do, because
I do.
Yeah, of course you do. But so I said, well, you need to go and find your own songs. It could be by whoever, find your own songs. But yeah, it's so far foolproof. I'm going to jump over one major thing that happened to you in 2003 and go to 2006 whilst we're in the world of teaching, when you went to Tanglewood for the summer. And I wonder who was teaching at Tanglewood, and how did you take the information that they gave you and add it onto your Yormaness and your Sega Stamness? How did you add on, and whose stuff did you have to add on?
I think our main teacher was basically Stefan Asbury, or at least he was like leading the program. I believe he still is. James Levine was teaching us because he was the chief conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra at the time.
Yes.
We also had Bernard Haitink and Herbert Blomstedt.
Wow, that's a list.
Yeah. So that was very, very beautiful. It was 2 months of very heavy work, of course. We did have some discussions with the teachers, but in a way, I don't remember really. I think they were very subtle. They were following our rehearsals, but they didn't interfere, as far as I remember. I remember James Levine watching a rehearsal of mine with Elliot Carter's opera, What Next?
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I didn't know it was him, but all of a sudden I could hear people laughing behind. And what I did was shh, because it's really hard. It's very, very hard to focus. And yes, all those tempo modulations, it's full of them. It's a very, very tricky piece, for about 45 minutes long. And everyone found this absolutely hilarious. No one had ever said shh to James Levine before. And I think he was more amused than anyone else by that. No, he was apparently laughing because he thought that, it's so insane what the young people can do. So it was a good laughter. This is what they told me afterwards. But it's so irritating when you try to really, really focus, and and then there's not silence in the hall. Anyway, what I really learned maybe during that summer most was from the the student orchestra, Tanglewood Music Center Orchestra, the young people, absolutely fantastic, gorgeous musicians, the energy, and they all had their coachings by the Boston Symphony Orchestra members, so they were very, very well played together, and that was amazing. And I feel that for a long while, I didn't get to conduct any as good orchestra as that. The young people, the best young people from around the world gathering together to play in Tanglewood.
It's an energy, isn't it? It's an energy that you get more often with a group like that. I'm in the middle this week of conducting. I'm jumping in, actually. I was due to do the rehearsals anyway and then pass it over to Marta Gardalinska, but Marta now cannot do the concert, so I'm going to do the concert with the CBSO's own youth orchestra, which goes up to the age of 21. So you have kids in there from 14 all the way up to 21. When it's right, there is an energy there that is beyond anything you rarely encounter when you conduct a professional orchestra, because they're because of the different ages, different ways of approaching it. But when it's right, my God, is it exciting! We're doing Lutosławski's Concerto for Orchestra this week, and we've only had 2 rehearsals on it. But when it's been good, by God, has it been good! And I know I've got the rest of the week to chip away.
But there is also a form of joy and surprise when things work. Professional orchestras expect things to work. So it's where you set your expectations, I think. And the young people, they are so genuinely surprised when things work really well. And then they are so proud of themselves, which is so beautiful.
I've not said it yet this week, but I will do at some point. And because I truly believe this. I will say to them at some point, look, you can play as well as the Berlin Philharmonic can. The question is for how long? It could be one chord, it could be one measure, it could be one bar, it could be 1 minute. But then somebody does something stupid and it brings it back down to youth orchestra again. The point is, you can play like the Berlin Philharmonic, and it will happen in the concert. Expect it to happen somewhere. But the question is, how long can you keep that ball in the air? How long can you keep it going before somebody does something, really stupid? But it's true. It's absolutely true. They can play with that amazing power and beauty and skill and love, and it can take off and fly. It just something will drag it back down again. It's just, you just have to accept that, but try and avoid being the person who drags it back down again.
Yeah.
I did say I jumped over something rather important, which was in 2003. You were the winner of the Jorma Panela Conductors Competition. How did that affect you and your career at that time? You were quite young. I'm trying to remember when you were born. You were 21, something like that. So how did that affect? Did it give you a good leg up the ladder? What was the prize? Was it just cash, or did you get engagements within Finland and further?
Yeah, that was great. I was in my second year in the conducting class, and somehow I remember when I got accepted to the competition, I remember that the atmosphere was a little bit like, no one really thought I would, or maybe the least myself, I thought that I would even be in the finals.
Yeah.
But somehow I have always had this, jumping a little bit further back in my history. When I first started dreaming about becoming a conductor, I was very young. And I did mention it in my family. And then my bigger sister, who is a great person, but obviously also a child herself back then, said that, no, you can't become a conductor because you're a girl. And then I figured out that, okay, maybe I should shut up, but let's see. And maybe that was a little bit the same atmosphere with the competition. I thought that maybe this is my moment now to actually up my game a little bit. And I did work very hard on the entire repertoire. I knew everything as well as I possibly could at that moment in time. And the prize was a bunch of cash. I paid my student loan instantly. And of course, it gave a lot of visibility.
Yes.
I was invited instantly to a conducting academy in London, where we worked with the Philharmonia Orchestra and LPO.
Yeah.
And their respective chief conductors at the time, Christoph von Dochnani and Kurt Masur. So that was beautiful. And I believe through that connection, then I also got my first manager. I was at Harrison Parrott at the very beginning of my career. So yes, it was very, very revolutionary for me, of course. I
think the management thing is almost the most important thing for somebody of your age at that time, to get management. And as you just said, that will give you visibility. And that's so important. And to be put in situations you would not have been put in if you had not have won. That's the point, isn't it? To be invited to go to the Philharmonia and the LPO thing. And then, you will be invited to do guest engagements, and to have management there, making sure that, are they the right ones for you at this point? So that's so important, because, when you're 21, if you're not managed or nobody picks you up from winning a competition, you're likely to just say yes to everything. And that's not always the best course of action.
Yeah, well, I did work a lot anyway.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit too much as well. But I feel that, when I finally myself started to see that maybe I shouldn't be doing everything, but instead starting to curate a little bit, doing the things that feel right for me, and maybe not being, running from one orchestra to the other. I didn't necessarily feel that I was listened to so much at a very young age, and the pressure was very high on, that I should just be very thankful and do what I'm told to do.
Yes, yeah.
And I guess this was also the reason why I then finished my contract with Harrison Barrett, and worked for a while without management. Yeah,
I bet that was hard. Not just finishing with Harrison Barrett, but working on your own. Because it's not a subject that's come up very often with people who've worked on their own, but what your agent does for you, and these are the things that it makes my skin crawl that I would have to do. Is let's say you go to the XYZ Symphony Orchestra, wherever that might be, you do a week's rehearsals and a concert, and then you leave. At some point, your manager will ring up the XYZ Symphony Orchestra and say, "Hi, how did Eva get on? Or how did Mike get on?" And then they get told, a précis of what's come back from the orchestra, or how they thought the concert went, or whatever else. The thought of me doing that about myself would just make my skin crawl. And also, bargaining over, your fee before you even get to the concert in the first place. So did you find that hard? Well, obviously, I would imagine you did. How was that time?
Oh, actually, I have to say that I very much enjoyed the freedom of not having to justify any decisions to anyone.
Really. Yes, of course. There's that. Yeah. That's the flip side. Yeah.
The other thing is that I found almost that, I'm basically working without management right now as well.
Okay.
The second time in my life. And negotiating fees is I believe it's easier for an artist to say that this is my fee. And then the orchestra either accepts it or says, "Oh, we are very sorry, we can't really do this. We can't really match this." Then I have a feeling with management there is a lot of businessman against businessman and counting pennies, and it can end up looking weird, the end result. And so no, I think that has been fine. I have never called an orchestra and asked, "How did I do?"
Fair enough. Yeah.
I think the feeling is quite obvious if there is going to be a continuation or not.
That's very true. That is very true. Yeah.
And then, I'm in the very fortunate position that I don't have to contact orchestras. They do contact me, and I get so many inquiries that unfortunately I have to say probably no to 9 out of 10 inquiries. It would be good to get the feedback though, because there is the danger that I just keep doing my mistakes year after year. It would be good to hear, "Oh, she shouldn't be doing this or that."
Yeah, but the good thing is that the phone is still ringing and you are turning down engagements, so you're not repeating mistakes and you're not doing crazy things, which is a good thing.
Well, that's the weird thing about conducting though, isn't it? Because you really don't know.
No, you don't know. No. Because some orchestras all sit there smiling at you, and then you leave the room, you leave the place, and then your manager says, "Well, I'm sorry, they didn't like you." You think, "Well, I thought they looked." And I've been to other places where they all sit there sternly facing you, and then you're immediately reinvited, and you think, well,
exactly.
I thought they hated me. It is very odd. Yeah, it is very odd. Guesting is where you first form bonds, and as you've just said, you get that feeling often, despite what I've just said. When you've done well and you've gone down well. You first guested in Iceland with the Iceland Symphony Orchestra in 2007, and then became chief in.
I think even before, actually. I think it was in 2005.
Yeah, wow.
I did a concert with them in 2005.
Yeah. So that's you've been going there on and off for all 15 years before becoming their chief conductor in 2020. Spending the time forming a bond is I find rather important. But I wonder whether you became chief conductor of the Nordic Chamber Orchestra in 2018. Was that another bond forming? Like we build friendships, or was that a love at first sight? How did that one come about?
Yeah, there are two very different stories. I have to say that I have very, very clear memories from going to Iceland the very first time. I did a school concert with them in 2005, I believe, and I even remember some of the program. We played third and fourth movements from Beethoven's 7, which was like really somehow. There was such an incredible energy on stage, and everyone was all smiles, and we had a great time together. So that was definitely love at first sight. Then I have to say that I don't entirely remember the first time going to the Nordic Chamber Orchestra. I've been there, of course, not so many times because I was chief conductor there 3 years. And before that, I had also been guesting. That was more something that I think we bonded over a longer period of time. We kind of grew into that relationship, which is good. I mean, both ways work. I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've mentioned guesting. I'm going to quickly jump to the first time I saw you conduct, actually, which was on the TV this summer when you conducted the BBC Philharmonic at the Proms. How was that, your first experience of a BBC Prom concert with the BBC Philharmonic, who is an orchestra I know very well and I've worked with many times and really enjoy working with? How was your Proms experience? Now, especially since there were 2 seasons when there were hardly anybody in the audience, to now have audiences back again. How was it?
Well, I have to say that I was a little bit nervous before the concert because I don't recall ever performing for such a huge audience indoors.
Yes.
And it was absolutely packed that evening. And I mean, I didn't know how I would react when I come on stage, would I freak out or something? I mean, I really felt that, we are balancing right now. But when I entered the stage, I was like, yes, this is why we do it. The energy from the audience was so beautiful. Just the applause is so huge when there are so many people in one hall. That was so much fun. Then, of course, I mean, we performed with BBC Philharmonic, who's a fantastic orchestra. We rehearse in Manchester, and then we come to London, and we have one short rehearsal in Royal Albert Hall, which is very, very different acoustically. All of this, it wasn't entirely easy. I felt, but I think, I mean, people seem to like the concert, and I mean, I just feel maybe my own experience wasn't the easiest. The spirit is so fantastic in the hall that it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that, when I remember playing for the CBSO, I must have played God knows how many proms. We under Simon Rattle, we used to do 2 every year, and then under Zachary 1, and then Andrus 1. So, I must have done probably getting on for 30 proms as a player. And you feel the warmth is different in there from the audience. You feel the energy is different from the audience.
Yeah.
And many of these people go night after night after night, and it's their big thing every year to go to as many proms as possible.
It's so beautiful.
I mean, I suppose in that regard, that it's like a big cuddle for you, a big hug, and it puts you in the right place. The only thing that changes that, and I felt it as a player too. I mean, one of the last concerts I played there in the Proms, I remember there being TV cameras, and nowadays there are these ones that sit on tripods and sort of remotely swivel around and looking at you. They're the things that can take you out of where you want to be in your brain and where you want to be musically, and sort of, you're conducting and looking at somebody and getting involved in the music, and then you see a camera go around looking at you. Yeah, and that must be something, because I've not experienced that. That must be something that can take you out of your comfort zone, but you have to try and block them out, I would imagine.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're obviously trying to be so discreet as possible.
Yes,
but yeah, I don't know. For me, it was more the acoustic experience that the hall was so different. I don't know how much time that would require for me to get used to the acoustic circumstances in that hall, and also for the musicians, how well they hear each other in the hall, which I believe they heard each other less in Royal Albert Hall than where we rehearsed. But yeah,
I suppose what we have to do in that circumstance is think, with an orchestra like the BBC Philharmonic, they will have done 2 proms a year at least.
More.
In the Royal Albert Hall for the length of their career that they've been in the BBC Philharmonic, and some of them may have come from the BBC Symphony Orchestra who do, you know, 10 a year or whatever. So, but every time they go there, they're having to spend the first half an hour to 45 minutes remembering what it was like playing in the Royal Albert Hall, but they'll get there quickly because of their experiences. You know, for us, we have to trust that they'll get there.
Exactly.
And not focus on things that, you know, just leave them for 40 minutes. They'll remember that they can't listen from the back of the first to the double basses as well as they can in their studio in Salford. You know, they'll work that out. But yeah, it's having the discipline to remember that, I suppose, isn't it? That's the thing. Yeah. And you know, all orchestral musicians, the difficult one is when everybody in the room has gone into a concert hall for the first time and nobody has an idea what's going on.
That must be a nightmare.
Well, that's when conductors should be using their assistants and saying, well, you stand and conduct, I'll go and listen, and then they can come back. And I've done that for Andris and for Sakari, and you know, that's an important role. Before we go to the 11th question, there was one more question, and you have mentioned it earlier about teaching. You go and guest teach at the Sibelius Academy. I also read, let's hope Wikipedia is correct here, that since starting in Reykjavik in Iceland, you've set up a conducting academy there. And I know that you've done masterclasses when you've traveled abroad. How do you find teaching? What approach do you have, and is it based on anybody from your past? What ethos? Are you very much into your stick technique, or are you very much into the music and the score study? How do you go about teaching?
I think initially, like the first time when I was asked to come and teach at the Sibelius Academy, which is now almost 10 years ago, I am pretty sure that I was focusing on all the stuff that I wish someone had taught me. Yeah. It's like they say, do as I say and not as I do. You know, exactly. Yeah. But I think also, well, having gone through 2 pregnancies and 2 cesarean sections, I have had a fair chunk of physical problems in my body at a certain stage. Well, the pregnancies were fine, actually. I loved conducting with a big belly. that was great. The C-section, not so much, of course. And that just made me realize which parts were never spoken about in our profession. And this is about having a good support in your core muscles. And I believe firmly in that if you have a very good support from the center of your body, you can do almost anything with your hands, and you'll still end up being quite clear. And this is maybe my biggest philosophy, and this is what I always talk about with the conducting students. Standing is of course also linked to this, but apart from being told that you shouldn't be jumping around, no one actually told me what I should think about while standing. So the philosophy of standing is quite important, I feel, for conductors. And there are some basic rules that I believe work for everyone, but as we already spoke before, everyone has to figure out their own Achilles heels and and such. And also the philosophy of conducting. What do we actually need to do there? You know, young conductors tend to be very much all over the place. There is like too much information in their heads, and this sometimes makes their conducting look a little bit messy. You know, they're all over the place. What do we need to focus on? And I think in the end, I mean, it can be cooked down to very, very concentrated stuff, which is the eyes. Who do you look at? And then with the hands, we have the sound and shape.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I was teaching 2 postgraduate students at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire last week. I gave them some podium time in front of the symphony orchestra, which I'm rehearsing at the moment, doing some Bernstein. And I said to them, you know, I'm sure you've got ideas about how you would like to conduct, what gestures you'd like to give. I said, but all of this is under the umbrella of your ears are listening, and whenever there's anything that the ensemble needs to be fixed, you have to fix it immediately. You have to put the fire out, as I call it, because I mean, if you don't put the fire out, fire spreads, and that bad ensemble will spread across the orchestra. So I said, whilst you're doing the things that we talk about, your gesture and your technique, always be listening, and then
of course, I mean, this is the first thing, of course.
Exactly, yeah. but I'm sure you'll agree with me. I'm not slagging off our colleagues, but there are some conductors who don't put the fires out because they're busy doing the gestures that they've practiced and they want to do at this place, which that's the orchestra. There are times when the orchestra needs us, and there are lots of times when they don't. And it's trying to figure that out as well, isn't it? When you can just let the orchestra play, and actually getting involved there is only going to make things worse. Just let them be, and then you need to get involved when you need to get involved.
Absolutely. Although then, I mean, because conducting is so terribly, there are so many sides to it.
Yes.
Somehow. And I've also heard very distinguished colleagues talking about just letting the orchestra fix their own problems by themselves and just giving them time. But I'm sure that this depends very much on what is the overall rehearsing time available.
Yes.
Because this varies also very much depending on where you are.
Absolutely. And also it depends on the problem.
Absolutely.
I think there are some problems that can only be fixed by you giving a specific beat at a specific time to help the orchestra play, which is why conducting was invented in the first place, because orchestras had got too big to fix their own problems. They needed something to stand there to help them do that. Whether it was early, conductor composers like Strauss, Mahler, whoever, and then, the professionals from Nickisch onwards. But there are times I think, I'm going to let that go. Next time through, I'll listen and see whether it fixes itself. And often the second time it does. But
occasionally.
Yes. But there are other times when it's never going to fix itself, and you have to get your hands dirty and help them achieve what they want to achieve. I fervently believe there isn't an orchestra on the planet that doesn't want to play together.
No. Of course.
But there are times the only way that can happen is for you to help them. They're definitely the case.
Yeah.
The 11th question, which you don't know is coming or didn't know was coming, is actually, it can be talked about as far as teaching, because the question that every conductor has answered is, how do you go about learning a score? I know, you say you play the piano. Do you ever sit at the piano? Do you start with an overall view and zoom in, or do you start at bar one and go to the end? And the other thing is, and maybe as a panel student, you're not a red, blue, and black writer and scribbler of things, because I know he's not a fan of that. He saw my scores and said, "Oh, what is all this colouring?" How much do you write in your scores? Are you a scribbler in? Do you use colours, or do you like to keep things very clean?
I do scribble. I do, yeah. I try to keep it only pencil colored, but of course there are some pieces that are so hard or fast or something that or very small or something. I mean, sometimes I just need to highlight them in different colors. But yeah, I'm trying to keep things pencil colored. I quite enjoyed. I did Beethoven 9 a few times before, and I did it from the Breitkopf new edition earlier, and that was, is my preferred edition, and I love working from those. And this autumn now I did it twice. I did it with Los Angeles Philharmonic and now with BBC Philharmonic, and both orchestras said that we are doing it from Bärenreiter, and I said, oh, fine. I guess I'll have to, I only had the study score of Bärenreiter with me, so I bought the big one, and I very much enjoyed having the blank pages of a piece that I know very well. And then, of course, I try to be very, very scarce in my markings and only do the things that I really need to have there. But if I get a completely new score, I definitely need to have a big overview of it. I mean, just, basically reading it through in tempo, kind of, and getting the sense of the dramaturgy of the piece, and also, in the middle, like 20 really hard pages. These will
Yeah.
need some time, or
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. And then, of course, I mean, once you start studying, I guess I can't really imagine that you would do it in many different ways, but there's the horizontal and the vertical look at the, harmonies versus phrasings. How do these things work together?
Yeah.
And the interpretation kind of sneaks in somewhere. I can't really put my finger on it. Where does this begin? And it never ends, really, does it? Because every orchestra is different, and even though I may have had a funny idea in my head, which I wanted to do, but maybe the musicians did it much better their own way. Then I like to leave that space for the musicians. Of course, if you kind of get a very blank read through from the orchestra, where only right notes are being played, right dynamics, but not really interpretation, then it's very good to have your own ideas at hand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think for me, maybe one of the most important things is the dramaturgical structure, how to build up that, also the tempo structure, which I feel that surprisingly many colleagues seem to kind of they're not so interested in it. I mean, many are, of course, but then you hear also performances where I'm sure that tempo structure has not been really considered. And this is for me the most important thing by far.
Especially with a new piece, like you've just said, because I've done it very recently. I'm doing a piano concerto premiere at the start of November. Brand new piece. You sing your way through it, and you get a chance of feeling the structure and feeling where the high points and the low points are, and how the music ebbs and flows and goes to these places. And I think that's a really important, especially with a world premiere or a piece that you don't know. And if you're somebody who doesn't listen to recordings, I do listen to recordings, but I know some conductors who don't, who they want to get it all in their head in their own way. It's that way of feeling the structure. If you just work through it in tempo and sing through it in tempo, and you'll find where the high points are, and you'll find where you need to think about the tempo relationships very clearly, because if you don't, it's going to fall flat. It's not going to work. Slightly different with the piano concerto, because I've got, I'll be, the pianist has got an awful lot more control over the tempos than I do, but you know what I mean. But it's you'd be surprised how many different processes I've heard over 120 or so episodes, Eva. You really would. But
that's so interesting, because I can only see my way of working. This is the only possible way for me, really.
But that's the important thing, is that everybody has got their own way and it works for them. That's the important thing. And no, I play the piano only if there are, because I have perfect pitch, so most harmonies I can kind of hear in my head. But if it gets very, very hard, or if there are like incredible transpositions sometimes and my brain is too tired, then I just sit down at the piano and try to so this is the chord. But unfortunately I'm not in shape for playing scores. I haven't practiced the piano in almost 20 years, so unfortunately it would be great to be able to play Salome, just like that. But I can't. Dear listener, breaking news. In the past, I've offered you the chance to have conducting lessons from myself via Patreon. Sadly, all of those places have now been taken, and until one of my 6 pupils unsubscribes, this offer no longer exists. You can, however, still benefit in every other way from subscribing to my Patreon page. I've written an article on score marking, a set of diaries from my trips guest conducting, I've started a series of articles on the art of programming, and I'm about to start a new series on string playing for non-string playing conductors. There's over 25 hours of interviews, including my latest one with the principal double bass of the Concertgebouw Orchestra and media personality Dominic Seldis. All of this is available at patreon.com/A Mic on the Podium, and from just £5 a month, you can gain access to this ever-growing resource on conductors and conducting. That's patreon.com. Details and links to the page are in the show notes attached to this episode. Now, the all-important 10 questions with my guest, Eva Ollikainen. Eva, it's 10 questions time, and as ever, I always start with, what sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, is this terrible? I love silence.
It's not terrible at all.
And what do I hate? I really hate when everyone is talking at the same time and I can't hear anyone very well. This goes at home and at work and out there in the world.
Yeah, when you're in there are certain rooms, aren't there, where the acoustic just means that all you can hear is noise. Yeah, you can't. Yes. You struggle to pick out anybody's conversation.
Yeah.
I agree. I've been to some social functions where we've all had dinner in a room like that, and you just think it's pointless me being here. I can't hear anybody's conversation at all. No, I agree. It's a horrible noise. Number 3. If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
I would go for a long walk somewhere in the nature. I would rest, I would eat well, and I would read a book, and then I would cuddle with my kids.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful answer. How old are your children?
They are 7 and 9.
So they're still at an age that they don't mind being cuddled, I suppose.
No. They love. Yeah. They are in a fantastic age. They still love. Yeah, very much.
Good. Number 4 is, who would be your favorite conductor or conductors of yesteryear?
I mean, Carlos Kleiber. Yeah. There's really no comparison, I think.
Well, it wouldn't surprise you to know that he has come up more than anybody else's name. Yeah. I remember early on, when I started this podcast during the darkest days of the coronavirus pandemic, somebody tweeted me and said, "Is everybody going to say Carlos Kleiber?" To which my answer was, "Well, if they are, let's see. And then if they are, then maybe there's a reason why." I gave him as my answer, and many others have given him as my answer. So perfectly acceptable. Question 5 has often been considered to be a lot more difficult, and Daniel Harding said it was cruel. Who would be your favorite current conductors or conductor?
Oh, but this is now then what repertoire? And
brilliant. Well, go for repertoire specific, because I think many conductors have done that, and that's perfectly...
God, no. I can't. That is diplomatically not. Oh yes, but there are so many wonderful colleagues. So many wonderful. Well, the most incredible concerts that I've heard, well, because I have actually experienced Carlos Kleiber alive.
Oh, wow. Oh,
yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. No, but someone who is still alive, Christian Thielemann, together with Staatskapelle Dresden. I think those concerts have been the most incredible pieces of art that I have ever witnessed.
Yeah. And what do you remember? What I'm sure you do remember what they were playing and what he was conducting?
Oh, I've heard a lot of concerts with them because I worked quite a bit in the city. Yeah. But every concert with him and opera, I would say.
I know, reading reports just from this week, that he did a Bruckner's 8th Symphony with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, which seems to have lit a fire or set a bomb off over there in Chicago, that there were people are clamoring to sign him. But yeah, brilliant choice. Number 6 is, what is the hardest work you have ever conducted?
Well, Turandot without rehearsal.
Oh, very good answer.
Definitely. Otherwise probably the already mentioned Elliot Carter's opera, What Next? Probably one of the absolutely hardest things, I think, like mathematically, just to figure out.
But also with something like Elliot Carter, it's not only the maths of what time signatures you're conducting one after another after another. Your ears have got to be at 110% because of you're trying to work out the pitches that people are playing against each other or in their lines, trying to spot wrong notes. Some of the rhythms are particularly difficult to work, and so your antennae are just on a red alert all of the time, and meanwhile you're doing a conducting exam, so yeah, that's tough. But yeah, doing an opera like Turandot on no rehearsal, yeah, good luck. How did it go?
Well, we survived, and they have invited me back. So,
well, it went very well. There we go. Yeah, tick, tick, tick. Yeah, brilliant. When traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
I believe it's called a spike mat in English. Is it?
A spike mat?
Did you know? No.
What's that?
Oh, it's upstairs now. I can't show you.
Okay.
It's a mat with a lot of spikes, and then you lie on it. And
I know. Yes. I know.
In English.
Yeah, it probably could be called a spike mat, but now you've explained what it is. Yes, I think we have one downstairs. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure we have one. Yeah, and that's just.
I'm lying on it every morning and evening.
Yeah,
and it's great for the back.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. When you said spike mat, I immediately thought, do you play the cello? The sort of thing that you put underneath your cello spike. But when you explain what it is, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Especially if you're on, let's say you go from Iceland to somewhere else before you come back home to Denmark. You 3 weeks away and a lot of traveling and bag carrying and whatever else. Yeah, you need something like that. Yeah, I often have a tennis ball in my carry-on bag so that I can put the tennis ball against the wall and then just rub my back up and down. But yeah, those spike mats are really good. What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
Now, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is the traveling and the flying. And this is something that I'm dreading when the question will come from my kids. Mommy, you're flying quite a lot, aren't you? And that's not very good for the planet, is it? This is something that is worrying me a lot. And I think generally we should think about this as artists. How do we plan our routes? This would be the one really good reason for me to actually start working with a general management again, because I would really need help in kind of planning the routes, maybe flying somewhere, but then planning 3 or 4 weeks around where you can travel by train and then flying back home or something like that. But we should definitely reduce our flying, I think, all of us. And I think artists really should be front runners in this discussion, because we come from very different backgrounds in the society. We are often not so politically involved, I think, which is a good thing when we're talking about climate change, I believe. And obviously, a lot of us have a lot of visibility in the different medias. So I think we should use our position in trying to start the discussion regarding flying and our future on this planet.
I think you're right wherever possible. I mean, there are orchestras already. I read articles online saying that there are some orchestras who are dedicated to traveling, especially in mainland Europe, or even from the UK to mainland Europe, using the Eurostar and going everywhere by train. I have to point out that there are some unavoidable things. I mean, there are boats to Iceland, but would you want to spend any time on those boats to get? If you're the conductor of the Iceland Symphony Orchestra, you pretty much have to fly there. But it doesn't mean that if you're doing,
I should have to move there and stay kind of there for the time being, and then what after that? I mean, I don't have any career, right? So this is very, very tricky. But this is why I really think that we should talk about it more and. Think about it.
But it doesn't mean if you go from a week in Reykjavik and then you're working in the America for 2.5 weeks that you can't do the American bit whilst you're there on train or on whatever, however else you want to do it in a lower carbon footprint. Absolutely, I think I've done some trips recently where I've come back from mainland Europe on the train rather than flying.
That's great.
Yeah, and as it happened,
I love traveling by train.
Yeah, it worked very well. But then there are other times when your diary just doesn't commit to it, and you have to have that moral discussion. Absolutely, very valid answer. And travel has not come up for a while as an answer, so that's great. Number 9, often get very surprising answers to this question. Let's see whether yours is surprising or not. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Too many. Too many. I'm just a very curious mind.
Yeah.
I would love to attempt being an artist, like visual artist, but then also architect, historian. Those would probably be on the very top of my list.
Yeah.
I have a very, very soft spot for baking, and especially when I was younger and had a little bit more time, I was really fascinated by that. And at a certain point, I wanted to open a cafe in Helsinki. It never happened, of course, but a beautiful place with the city's best croissant and the best tea in the town. And, this was my plan. Well, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, architect is an answer I gave in episode 50 when I was interviewed for my own podcast. And I think there's an awful lot of similarities between architecture or being an architect and being a conductor. But, there is that visual sense. As for being a baker, no, I've never been interested in that. But I would have been a very, very valued customer and come well. If you made good croissants and coffee, I'd have come. Yeah. Brilliant. Question 10, and as the rain teems down on the Velux window above me, dear listener, which is that noise you can hear, we get to my final and favourite question. If the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Oh, I think I would go with Icelandic lamb. Ooh. I eat a lot of vegetarian food otherwise, but Icelandic lamb is so beautiful. And Icelandic tap water, it's the best thing in the world. I always drink 2 liters when I come to Iceland. It's so pure and wonderful.
The glacial clean water is one of the best drinks on the planet. I drink a lot of water a day. I'm a 2 liter to 3 liter water a day person. Love it. What a great choice. I haven't had that before. And Icelandic lamb, I didn't know that they specialized in it, but I love lamb. So I'm assuming it's probably very well grass-fed, looked after, and incredibly tasty. Am I right?
Yes, and they have had good lives, I think. They have lived a good life out there. Yeah.
Well, a good life and a good interview it's been. It's been wonderful meeting you, Eva, and I hope maybe we can have something stronger than a glass of Icelandic water, but I'd love to try Icelandic water one day anyway. But we can meet over a glass of something and carry on chatting one day in the future. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat with a Welsh conductor who shot to fame when he won the Leeds conducting competition in 1986. He has had a long and distinguished career, holding title positions in Belgium, Norway, France, the US and the UK. He has also had to go through the arduous task of learning to conduct again after suffering a stroke in 2021. But until then, bye-bye.